Welcome back to Sip and Talk. Great to have you with us.
Hey, everyone. Good to be here.
Always good to chat. So, bit of a crazy week in the news, huh?
Understatement, maybe.
Yeah.
Things are definitely heating up.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, let's try and unpack this a bit. Today, we're doing, a proper Sip and Talk exploration into something that's, making headlines and probably making your gas tank feel a bit emptier. We're talking about the escalating situation in the Middle East.
That's right. We're looking at the recent, pretty intense conflict. You had Israel's Lion's Roar operation hitting Iranian nuclear sites.
Right.
And then Iran's pretty swift retaliation. True Promise Action 3 with like a whole barrage of missiles and drones. It's been going on for about a week now. And yeah, it's definitely shaking things up globally.
So the big questions, I think, on everyone's mind are, is the U.S. with President Trump in charge actually going to get directly involved, jump in? And maybe just as important, what's really happening behind the scenes with the information we're all seeing? You know, who's telling what story? And, well, why?
Yeah, the narrative war. It's huge.
Okay, let's start with what actually happened, or at least what's been reported. We've seen these accounts of Israeli strikes hitting places like Natanz and Isfahan.
Key nuclear sites.
Exactly, and apparently taking out some of Iran's S-300 defense systems. Those are pretty advanced, right?
Oh, yeah, Russian-made top-tier stuff. Getting past those is significant.
And get this, there were even reports, kind of hushed tones about top Iranian military leaders and nuclear scientists being, removed from the picture, if you catch my drift.
Take it out.
Yeah. So Israel's basically saying, look, we've got air control over Tehran, and we are serious about stopping Iran going nuclear.
But Iran's response, wasn't small either. We're talking over 150 ballistic missiles, right. More than 100 drones launched at Israel.
That sounds massive.
Yeah, it is. But interestingly, the reports suggest the actual damage wasn't maybe as severe as those numbers sound. No deaths reported, which is frankly amazing.
Really? After all that?
Yeah. And attacks on, say, Tel Aviv were surprisingly down. But their state media, they're saying everything's fine, totally under control. Even showed off some nuclear bomb video clips.
Seriously? Wow. Talk about a flex.
A flex that apparently happened while their supreme leader was maybe hiding in a bunker.
Oh, the irony.
And their national internet connection reportedly dropped to just 3%. Doesn't exactly scream, everything's fine.
Sounds like controlled chaos at best. And what about the rest of the world?
Mostly. The UN, most countries are just screaming, calm down, everyone chill.
Standard diplomatic playbook.
Pretty much. Though German Chancellor Merz apparently said Israel was, quote, doing the dirty work for the world. Which is, that's a take.
Whoa, okay. Didn't mince words there.
Not really. Even Putin apparently offered to mediate. But reports say Trump basically told him to sort out Ukraine first.
Okay, so brings us back to the U.S. What does this all mean for America, really? What are the options?
Right. This raises that important question. What can the U.S. realistically do militarily here? And how likely is it?
Yeah.
I mean, the big one everyone sort of whispers about is a full-scale strike, hitting all of Iran's nuclear facilities, government targets, maybe even their oil refineries.
Like everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
But honestly, our read is that's the least likely option. That's probably reserved for something truly extreme, like, Iran directly attacking a U.S. base or killing American personnel.
Okay.
And the U.S. already has a huge presence there, right? F-22s, air defenses, destroyers, and now a third aircraft carrier, the Ford, is heading that way. They're positioned.
Right. So a full-on invasion or war isn't exactly high on the bingo card then. What about something more surgical, more limited?
Exactly. That's the much more talked about scenario for a potential limited U.S. attack. It involves those super cool B-2 stealth bombers.
The stealth ones. Very sci-fi.
Totally. And they'd be carrying these GBU-57 bunker buster bombs. We're talking 30,000 pounds.
Yeah.
Each. Non-nuclear, but immense power.
30,000 pounds. Okay.
Yeah. So the idea is they could fly from the U.S., maybe Diego Garcia, hit targets very precisely. And these bombs can apparently penetrate about 200 feet underground.
200 feet? That's deep.
It is. The goal would be, to blow up the tunnels, the ventilation shafts, basically collapse the underground facilities, hopefully setting back Iran's nuclear program by, say, 5 to 10 years.
And the radiation risk from hitting a nuclear site.
The assessment seems to be that any leakage would be manageable, contained.
Okay, but here's where it gets tricky, right? I remember reading the Fordo facility, that really important one, is supposedly buried 300 feet deep.
Bingo. That's the catch.
So 200 feet of penetration might not cut it. It's like Trying to scoop out a really deep gopher hole with a teaspoon when you probably need a backhoe?
That's a pretty good analogy, actually. Precisely. Hitting Fordo effectively might need multiple bombs landing on the exact same spot, which is incredibly difficult technically.
Right.
And, this is key, it's probably not something Israel could do alone right now. Their planes likely can't carry these massive GBU-57s effectively for that kind of mission. It would almost certainly require U.S. pilots, U.S. B-2s.
So Israel acting alone is riskier, even though they have good special forces. You mentioned that Syria raid.
They do have amazing special forces, yeah. Like that raid on Syria's chemical weapons facility was incredible. But Fordo, it's specifically designed, hardened to withstand conventional bombs. It's a whole different level of challenge.
So even for Israel, the risks are just extremely high.
Exceptionally high. High risk of failure, high risk of massive regional escalation if they tried and it didn't quite work.
Okay, so it's really not as simple as just saying, let's bomb it. There are layers to this onion, or maybe layers to this underground nuclear facility.
Yeah, exactly. Layers of reinforced concrete and rock.
All right, let's shift gears a bit. Beyond the missiles and bombs, there's this whole other battlefield, the information war.
Oh, yeah, crucial.
And what's really fascinating here is China's role. It seems complicated. On one hand, you have their foreign ministry spokesman, Lin Jian, saying all the right diplomatic things. You know, they're highly concerned, they're against violating Iran's sovereignty, pushing for de-escalation. Sounds very neutral.
Very standard diplomatic language, yes.
Yeah.
But then you connect the dots. There was that eyebrow-raising incident, wasn't there, where China's consul general in Japan, Xu Jian.
Oh, I remember this.
Yeah, he reposted an image, like a cartoon, comparing Israel to Nazis.
Oof. Yeah, that caused a stir.
Big time. He deleted it later, but, I mean, the damage was done. It drew huge criticism, including from Israel's ambassador, who flat out called it anti-Semitic.
So even with the official neutral stance, actions like that, they kind of hint at where China, or at least parts of the government, actually leans, right? Especially in the public eye.
It strongly suggests a leaning, yeah. It reveals a certain perspective being allowed, or even encouraged, within parts of the state apparatus when it comes to framing this conflict.
Oh, okay. So how does China actually push these narratives then? Is it just through official news channels, or is it more subtle?
Oh, it's way more sophisticated than just official news. They're playing a multi-layer game, especially on social media within China.
Like Weibo and Douyin. Their Twitter and TikTok.
Exactly. They actively use those platforms to paint Iran as, you know, the victim or maybe the resistance fighting against Western powers, against the U.S. and Israel.
So they control the narrative domestically.
Pretty tightly. For instance, after Iran's attack on Israel back in April 2024, you saw official Chinese media posts on Weibo getting thousands and thousands of comments. And a lot of them were questioning Israeli reports, echoing that official line. It shows clear narrative guidance.
And are they trying to stir up feelings, like using emotional governance, is that the term? Pushing unity or anger to get people fired up?
That seems to be a big part of it, yeah. Emotional governance.
Yeah.
And it's not just domestic. Internationally, you've got CGTN.
China's global news channel.
Right. Spreading this kind of pro-Iran or at least anti-Israel story in multiple languages. They even partner with local media, say, in Latin America, to get wider reach.
And what kind of angles do they push?
They'll really highlight Iran condemning Israel's actions in Gaza, for example. But they'll downplay the actions of groups like Hamas, framing things often as Israeli aggression rather than using terms like terrorism. It's a consistent framing.
And here's where it gets really interesting. It's not just China acting alone, is it? It feels like they're part of a band, maybe with Russia and Iran.
Absolutely. It's like a coordinated effort.
Yeah.
China, Russia with RT, Iran with Press TV. They've basically formed this sort of anti-Western alliance in the information space.
An info war alliance.
Pretty much. They share content, they amplify each other's messages. The main goal seems to be chipping away at U.S. and Western influence and credibility. Remember during COVID?
Oh, yeah, the whole U.S. virus origin thing they all pushed.
Exactly. It's that kind of coordinated campaign. And it's not just informal. They have actual formal agreements to share content, cross-promote. It's systematic.
Wow. So it's this huge multi-platform, multi-language echo chamber trying to reshape how the world sees these events. Like they're all in a giant group chat sharing memes and articles to boost their shared message.
That's a good way to put it. A very well-funded and strategic group chat.
But, okay, here's a potential twist in the tale. You'd think with all this official pushing, everyone in China just believes it, right? Falls in line.
You might think so.
But apparently, maybe not. We're seeing indications that Chinese netizens, regular people online, are actually questioning a lot of this official propaganda.
Yeah, this raises a really important question. How effective is all this propaganda, really? There were reports, I think around June 2025, showing Chinese social media users. Well, they were seeing the state media and those pro-government influencers hyping up Iran's victory. But the regular users, they were actually posting support for Israel and the U.S. Some were even saying they hoped the Iranian regime would be overthrown.
No way. Seriously.
Yeah. And it suggests it's not just about the Middle East for them. It's almost like a way to vent frustrations about their own situation.
So using international news as a kind of proxy to complain about things at home, like economic worries or censorship, that's clever, like complaining about the traffic when you're really mad at your boss.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a way to express dissent indirectly. And it points to what some call the backfire effect.
The backfire effect. What's that?
It's this idea that when people are constantly fed information that contradicts what they see or believe or what reality seems to be, instead of changing their minds, it can actually make them dig in their heels even more. They believe their original position even stronger. So if the official news keeps shouting Iran is winning, and then, facts on the ground or other reports suggest otherwise, it can make people doubt the government's credibility across the board.
I get it. It's like when your friend tells you some totally unbelievable story, and then you find out it wasn't true. You start doubting everything they say after that, right? Even the stuff that probably is true.
Exactly like that. So while China's censorship is powerful, they have things like community notes now, plus the huge 50-cent army suppressing dissent online.
Right. The paid commenters.
Yeah. That can work in the short term. But in the long run, this kind of persistent questioning, especially from younger people who are often savvier at finding information online, it could really weaken that official narrative over time.
We've even seen things like foreign embassy Weibo accounts becoming weird little islands for protests before, haven't we? Shows censorship isn't foolproof.
Precisely. It shows the limits.
So the more they push, the more people might just pull away.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
It's a real dynamic to watch.
Okay, so given this big information push from China, Russia, Iran, how are Western countries fighting back? Or are they just letting them run wild with the narrative?
No, not at all. There are efforts. The U.S. State Department, for example, has its Global Engagement Center.
Yeah.
And a big part of its job is specifically to expose and counter this kind of disinformation.
Okay.
The UK, remember, actually revoked CGTN's broadcasting license a while back.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the reason was concerns about impartiality, like how they reported on Xinjiang.
Right, I remember that.
And outlets like the BBC, Voice of America.
Yeah.
They're actively trying to increase their Chinese language content to provide an alternative, independent perspective. So, yeah, it's definitely seen as a battle of narratives, each side trying hard to get their version out there.
But is it really a fair fight? I mean, China has the Great Firewall, right? Blocking lots of Western sites.
That's the huge challenge. Western media faces massive hurdles getting into China. Plus, China has its own internal counterforces. You mentioned the 50-cent army. There's also this group called the Cyber Civilization Volunteers.
Sounds very grand.
It's estimated to be around 20 million people. Basically, a huge network actively countering Western reports online, promoting the party line.
20 million, wow.
And then there's the money. Financially, it's incredibly skewed. One figure from 2021 suggested the U.S. Global Engagement Center's budget, specifically for countering China, was around $11 million.
Okay. Sounds decent, but...
But China's estimated total propaganda budget, somewhere around $10 billion.
Billion. With a B. Okay, that's not a fair fight. That's like bringing a slingshot to a tank battle, budget-wise.
It gives you a sense of the scale difference, yeah. In terms of raw resources, it's heavily weighted.
Wow. Okay, let's shift one last time. This whole conflict, it's not just about media narratives and missiles. It's hitting us in the wallet too, right? Cold, hard cash. Specifically energy.
Absolutely. That's the most immediate, tangible impact for most people. International oil prices are surging.
Yeah, I've seen the headlines. Brent crude over $90 a barrel.
Potentially, yeah. And it's because of the risk to shipping, especially in the Red Sea. But crucially, the Strait of Hormuz.
That narrow passage.
Tiny but vital. Something like 30% of global oil and gas sales through there. Any disruption, or even the threat of disruption, sends prices soaring.
And for China, this must be a huge headache. Don't they get a lot of oil from Iran?
A lot. Around 90% of Iran's exported oil reportedly goes to China. So, yeah, this instability is a massive supply risk for Beijing. Huge pressure on their energy security.
So, Yeah, definitely not just a Middle East problem. It's a fill up your tank problem for pretty much all of us. What about the longer view, the long game for global energy?
That's a really important question. Longer term, if Iran's oil exports really do get restricted, maybe by sanctions or damage, China will have to pivot, won't they?
Find other suppliers.
Exactly. Probably increase imports from places like Russia, Saudi Arabia, maybe even Venezuela more.
Okay.
This conflict could also, kind of ironically, speed up China's own push towards renewable energy, to reduce that long-term dependence on volatile Middle Eastern oil.
Makes sense. Diversify away from the hotspots.
And globally, big if, but Iran's nuclear sites or its oil refineries were seriously damaged or destroyed, you could see maybe a 5–10% drop in global oil supply. That would push inflation even higher everywhere. It's a massive potential geopolitical shift.
Yeah.
And like you said, ironically, it might actually accelerate the green energy transition in Europe and the US too, which then, funnily enough, could impact China's exports of things like solar panels. It's all interconnected.
Wow. Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. What does it all mean? China seems to be playing this careful game, trying to look like a neutral mediator. But their public messaging, their info-war tactics, they definitely lean towards Iran, and they're clearly coordinating with Russia.
Yeah, it looks like part of that bigger geopolitical play, trying to balance against U.S. and Israeli influence, maybe push back against sanctions, or just fundamentally make sure their energy supply from the Middle East is safe. That seems critical for them.
And the propaganda piece is about making Iran look strong, keeping morale up there, but also boosting China's own image in the, the global south.
Exactly. The developing world, essentially.
Yeah.
Trying to position themselves as a leader, an alternative to the West.
And the future. What happens next really hangs on whether the U.S. jumps in fully.
How much damage Iran's nuclear program actually takes long term.
And if somehow, against the odds, diplomacy can find a way back in.
Right. But for now, it feels like military confrontation is really driving things. And China's role seems more about playing that long game, that geopolitical chess match, rather than getting directly involved in the fighting itself.
Okay, so here's a final thought, something for you to chew on as you go about your day. In this world where information is so clearly a weapon, how do you actually sort through all the noise? How do you figure out what's real and what's just to spin? Something to maybe mull over next time you're scrolling through your feed.
That's a great one. Seriously important, especially with how much misinformation and just sheer volume of information is out there. Really makes you think about, critical thinking skills.
Absolutely. All right, that's all the sipping and talking we have time for today. If you enjoyed this exploration, please make sure you subscribe to Sip and Talk wherever you get your podcasts.
And definitely check out our old friend Micky's YouTube channel. He's got some hilarious memes, cool music, wine tasting reviews, awesome travel vlogs.
He does. It's genuinely fun stuff.
Seriously, it's really fun. You got to check it out.
We will catch you next time for another Sip and Talk.